All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take you through a small presentation reflecting our project, what we are doing in Tanzania, and it is on fortification of sunflower oil, which is extracted, produced locally by local farmers. Now, the genesis of this idea came from the government effort to address the issue of food security, especially vitamin A deficiency disorders, which is very common among children under the age of 5 and the lactating mothers. So this was a government approach to use what you call PPP, public-private partnership, in order to address this vitamin A deficiency problem. In many of the African countries, this has been a really serious problem when governments alone tried to solve this kind of deficiency, nutrient deficiency among children under the age of 5. One of the things was that sunflower oil is produced locally by so many farmers, especially in some of the regions which we are going to mention down the presentation. So we have Shinyanga region and Manyara region. Sunflower seed is produced in large amounts, and we have small and medium level enterprises, which we call private sector, which are actually doing the extraction of the oil and package it and sell it to local communities. Now, as we all know that oil is a very good vector of vehicle for carrying vitamin A, and we have the what you call National Household Demographic Household Survey, which was conducted in 2010 in the whole country, and in this survey, 34% of children under the age of 5 and 37% of women of reproductive age, aging 15 to 49 years, were vitamin A deficient, and they had shown a number of vitamin A deficiency disorders, including night blindness by total spots, xerophthalmia, and even a total blindness, which is caused by vitamin A deficiency. So, noting that sunflower oil can be a very good vehicle for carrying the vitamin A to reach all the communities which are consuming the locally produced sunflower oil, then we came with the idea that if we can build a mechanism that we can fortify the oil, which is actually going to the consumers, that will be a very good way of reaching the local communities. So we started working with the SMEs, or small and medium level enterprises, which produce the oil, so that they can actually fortify the oil. The other aspect that I would like to put across in our background is that the SMEs have been registered by Tanzania Food and Drug Authority as producers of edible oil, but the requirement is that from October this year, the edible oil, which is produced locally and is actually sold out to the communities, must be fortified. So one of the issues was also trying to build the capacity of these SMEs to be able to fortify their oil with vitamin A, so that they can actually remain on business when it comes to the TFDA regulation. So we thought that this is also going to help the SMEs, the farmers, and also address the issue of vitamin A deficiency, especially among the children under the age of 5. We have large producers who are already starting to fortify edible oil, but these are based in Dar es Salaam. And if you look at the distribution system, most of their oil does not really go down all the way to the deep rural, isolated communities. And that's where the vitamin A problem is. And therefore, they also like to import palm oil from Asia and a couple of other places. This is the one they actually fortify. They don't go out there and buy the sunflower seed, crush it, extract the oil, and fortify and take it back to the consumers. We know that sunflower oil is a high premier, it's healthy oil. And many of the local communities would like to consume it. But now we are trying to see how best we can actually build the capacity of small and medium level enterprises to be able to fortify that oil that is going to the local communities. So in our project, therefore, we have a couple of things that we are addressing. First of all, the nutrition aspect, fortifying the oil that goes to the children and mothers and lactating mothers and pregnant mothers who are, have vitamin A deficiency. But also we have another aspect, the business model. Working with the SMEs to be able to survive on business, when it comes to the TFD requirement, they have to fortify. But also we have another aspect where we would like to empower these SMEs with the GMP, good manufacturing practices and good healthy practices, to be able to produce quality oil that can actually be fortified. Because you can't fortify sunflower oil without doing the cleaning. So here we are actually talking of fortifying sunflower which is not purified. So this is one of the things that we are going to address. So maybe taking you a couple of slides, the government has mandated the fortification of edible oil, and the research objective in our project was that to test whether the crude oil sunflower oil can actually be fortified by small and medium level enterprises for the local consumption in the context of where inventory turnover rate is rapid and the long shelf life is not actually required. From production to the end to the end user, the time is very, very short. And then the sustainable business models which can actually work with the SMEs, and the test whether the use of electronic voucher or e-vouchers method can actually succeed in promoting the consumption of the fortified oil. Last, the test to test whether fortified product can actually reduce micronutrient deficiencies in the vulnerable groups, especially targeting the lactating and children at the age of 5. So we also put a mechanism where we are actually going to measure impact, evidence-based impact, that at least there was an improvement in vitamin A status for children and the lactating mothers who consumed the food. So we started August 2014 in September and ends up in September 2017. And we have Manyara and Shinyanga regions, which are located in sunflower production zone. And then primary target, I would say we had 65,000 households where we are talking on in terms of children under the age of 5 and lactating mothers. And the project will benefit more than 400,000 people in those two pilot areas. We are working with 3 SMEs, or small and medium level enterprises, and a network of 300 registered retailers who usually distribute the fortified oil. As of end of September, 25,267 e-vouchers had actually been issued, and 18,380 have been redeemed. It means they have actually been used to access the fortified oil. And 40,000 liters of fortified oil had already been produced to the SME level, and 35,000 have been sold, reaching an estimated of 175,000 individuals. Here we're talking of households. So from here, I'll leave my colleague, Nadira, to talk about the business model, because she comes from MEDA, and MEDA is really a partner in businesses. So please, Nadira, take us through.
Yeah, so I'm going to cover, can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. I'm going to take you through a little bit on the business model and this crazy thing called the e-voucher, and then I'm going to give it back to Prof to talk about some of our baseline findings of the household survey. So on the business model, so we, as Prof mentioned, we work with 3 SMEs. These are guys who experience a seasonal sunflower crop. It's around for 6 months, and then it's not. How can we smooth things for them? How can we provide them with a supply chain for both pre-blend, for a distribution model to retailers? Those are the things that we work with. So I'm going to take you through a couple of them. So when we started this project, first was, let's just get these guys able to fortify. So one of the first things that we did is we designed, we contracted the design and build of 3 fortification tanks. These are locally designed, locally manufactured with local materials. Whew. And the point of that is precisely for scaling. If we want something to be able to be scaled in country, it's excellent if the expertise is within the country. So we were very, very intentional about that, and I'm happy to say that, actually to this day, I think another project funded by another donor may have already used our tanks, and for that we say great. Only better if more people are using it. Second, we needed to determine the vitamin A requirements. So how much vitamin A do you actually put in oil? And you would think that that would be easy to find out, but it wasn't, because several standards exist. The Tanzanian standard is one standard, and then they've signed on to something called the East African standard. Which one do we follow? And I think this is something that a couple of projects probably face, and not specifically in fortification, but in other areas as well. And so determining and being able to liaise with our government and our public sector officials, with industry, to determine some of this was something that we overcame, and we did find a standard that satisfied everyone's requirements. Next, as Professor mentioned, and Sokoine University was huge in this, is to be able to provide the good hygiene and good manufacturing practices training to ensure that the oil is clean, that it's processed well. If you go to these SMEs, or if you went to them, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to already, in 2014 and now, you will see a remarkable change. These places have become cleaner, they've become more efficient, their practices are way enhanced, and a lot of that is due to this project, and so we've seen real improvement in that regard. One of them is actually applying for HACCP, which for an SME is incredible. Second was to create demand. So we are talking about edible oil, which is consumed at the household level. It's consumed in scoops. Sometimes it's repackaged in water bottles. It's produced by these SMEs, and then they basically put it in drums and let it go down the chain. How can we get people to buy it in packages that are branded, things that are recognized? So they recognize that they are consuming fortified oil. So we did a cross between two things. We looked at conventional marketing and also behavior change, because what we want is for people to understand that fortification and vitamin A are beneficial for them, and to look for it, to look for the seal, the fortification seal, to look for the branding. So we're very conscientious about how we approach that. 3, this thing called pre-blend. So vitamin A, our vitamin A is produced in Germany. It comes to a large producer in a crystallized form, and then we have it formulated in a standard 1-liter bottle that can then be added to one of our tanks simply by one of our SMEs, and then mixed, so that 1,000-liter tank is fortified in the right concentration. So we were able to, so far, distribute 500 liters of pre-blend to our SMEs. Next, creating that distribution network. So our goal was 300 retailers. We now have 444 retailers registered, and more counting. Those are all active in different capacities, and I'll speak to some of that in a couple slides. And lastly, the permits. I mentioned to our vaccination partners that this is a challenge not only for one type of food security intervention, but probably all of us. Being able to comply with the regulatory standards, being able to understand, and a lot of the challenges is that they don't really know where they want to fit into. For us, it was peroxide levels, free fatty acids, and then the actual fortification amount for the vitamin A. Then the packaging. Initially, we thought we want to be able to supply the consumer with a 1-liter package, small enough for them to purchase, and something that we can offer a discount on. That subsequently changed, but even just to wait for that initial approval took us several months and delayed things, but we're back on track. This is one of our fortification tanks. We're very proud of it. It is very expensive, too expensive for us to scale. But the reason why we chose, these tanks are made from stainless steel, and the reason we chose them is because they were a gold standard, and we didn't want any risk of failure at an early stage. We are now working with regulatory authorities to say, listen, this is great, and we know this is great. What can we do? How can we adapt this? How can we modify this? And if you stay tuned for tomorrow on our presentation on scaling up, we hope to talk to you about some of those findings. So these are stainless steel tanks. They're lovely, and we can certainly make more, but I don't think they are cost effective from where we're sitting at this point in time. That being said, they have led us to produce a lot of oil. So these are our 3 SMEs, the brands of the SMEs that we work with, and you can see they're all in about the 13 to 14,000 range. 40,000 liters of oil is a lot of oil. To supply that to the supply chain is really good. I can tell you that in the last couple of months, we have seen more oil being pumped through, and that's because we've moved to larger sizes of oil. And that's an adaptation that we made. We've been able to change the e-voucher. We've been able to change the distribution. And these types of learnings that I'm hoping that we're going to be able to take forward when we talk about scale. We've sold 35,000 liters, and we estimate that's about 179,000 people who we have been able to reach. That sounds like a lot. I think we can do a lot more, and I think Prof will agree with me on that.
Yeah.
So our research questions. We wondered if something called the e-voucher can help stimulate demand. What this is a mobile coupon. We've used it, META has used it in the past for selling insecticide-treated bed nets. Those are large, quite expensive goods to trade. And what we've done is we've offered a discount on it, quite a substantial discount. We wanted to see if it's something that's fast-moving, can we offer a discount on a good and have that help it flow through the supply chain, especially with something that has high turnover. What we have found is that, so initially for the 1 liter, not so good because of the delays that it caused. And actually I'm going to slip over to the next slide. But the benefits of this is that you get real-time data on your sales, which is amazing. At this point in time, if I log into my computer, I can tell you exactly where and when a bottle of oil is sold. And from a sales perspective, from a marketing perspective, that's incredible information. I can tell you who purchased it. And initially when this project was designed, we were hoping that we could triangulate that with household data. So I can see the vitamin A status of a household and also see how much oil they purchased. Here are the issuances and redemptions. Professor already mentioned them. We have a redemption rate of 75%, which is quite high. But on average, it took 2.2 days to redeem. If you think about going to the grocery store and redeeming oil or purchasing oil, you're not going to wait in line for 2.2 days for your coupon to be processed. And that's the reality is people were not doing that. The majority of them were registering sales, lots of active retailers, but there were a lot of network outages and delays. Even when the network was strong, the retailers described system delays, and so there's something there that was unavoidable. And then there was the burden. So if I am a consumer, I exchange my voucher with my coupon to Professor Mosha, the retailer. He then has to give it to the distributor. The distributor gives it to the SME, and this all happens electronically, suffering those delays. So you guys can imagine that people are going to get a little bit discouraged over time. The retailers certainly were, what we found with some retailers is that they would just give the oil cheaply, go home at night, find a bunch of friends, and issue and redeem the vouchers together, which is not giving us the data that we wanted. So what did we do? We did not throw out the baby with the bathwater. We innovated something else. So currently, the way that the project functions is we use something called an e-wallet. So we, instead of offering a discount to consumers, and we acknowledge that we don't necessarily have the same level of granular data, we understand at the retail level how many bottles of oil and large bottles of oil are sold and issued and redeemed. And this has proven extremely, extremely effective at moving more oil through the market. If we compare the utility, so this is in the last 90 days, the blue part of this pie chart is how much oil was traded using the 1 liter. You can still see that in the last 90 days, that's still a substantial amount. This is between, I believe, June and August. So I would estimate that September and October look a little bit different. The 20-liter bottle took off immensely. Why? Because people can pour it out, and they can give you just the oil, the amount of oil that you want in small size. And it's these types of adaptations that we think will help us scale in the long term. And the 5-liter was an experimental part of the SMEs. A big part of this project has been listening to the retailers, listening to the SMEs, listening to the consumers. What do they want? How do they approach the market? How can we use their existing practices to introduce a new product? And that kind of partnership between the public and the private sector is really, being able to extend a public good that's beneficial through the private sector, that has been huge. If I break down the volume for you by package size, you can see in June when new packages were starting to be introduced, we only saw the 1 liter in Manyara and Shinyanga. Sales were pretty low. As we've gone through the 20 liter, this, can you see? Yeah. So this is the 20 liters in Manyara, and just in the month of August, and this is just with the 10 pilot retailers out of that 444, we saw a huge amount. So our overall oil is increasing in volume, which is very, very exciting for this project. So we're very, very optimistic about where we're going to go. Which makes us wonder, is this business model sustainable? So are these discounts in what we're offering, or even the whole chain that we're using? The second question of our research objectives, is it sustainable? We have an independent researcher who's evaluating the business model for validity. So we have contracted the Royal Tropical Institute in the Netherlands to be able to do some qualitative research on our business model. And so they did an initial field trip in May of 2015, and then again in April 2016, and they'll be out in the field again, likely in the spring. And they talked to all the market actors along the value chain, so SMEs, retailers, consumers, distributors, a lot of them. And what we found at Resurvey was that people are willing to sell this oil. People are excited about it. They understand that the regulation and the idea of fortified oil is something that's coming through the chain, and their ability to take it on is going to make them competitive in the future. But the turnover is still small. Why? Because our oil, our fortified oil, is still expensive compared to unfortified oil. Why is that? Because the fortificant, but that's just the equivalent of like 9 cents a liter. You have the packaging, which is huge, and then the care of it as it goes through. A lot of the packaging for large oil is reused through, again, so a producer will produce in 20-liter drums, sell it, someone will bring it back again. They'll refill it. We can't do that with fortified oil. We have to be clean about it, and we have to ensure the quality of what was in there. Also, because oil is unrefined, it is more susceptible to degrading over time. So we need to make sure we're using clean bottles all the time, and that adds cost. Also, it's a new product. These things take time. So people are welcoming the new volumes, and I think our retailers are quite excited. The distributor was something that was not factored in initially in the project design, and it has proven to be quite challenging because they are the ones who need to get things from the SME to the consumer, through to the retailer, then to the consumer. And understanding those relationships of credit, the initial e-voucher that included them was quite administratively burdensome. Those things are still being worked out, but being a project that is scale in mind, we have left a lot of those things to the SME, and letting them negotiate some of those relationships has been actually very key to the success of it. And lastly, the SMEs. Working with small businesses is challenging, to no one's surprise. These guys don't have computers. They don't have Excel spreadsheets. They can tell you roughly how much they've produced and sold in the last month, but we actually make them collect on it, which is a total change for them. Credit is there one day, credit is not the next. They have side businesses, and so they are ready, and they understand that this is becoming a change in the sector, and they're excited to take it on, and they're glad to be part of this initiative, but they need to see more, and they need to see the profitability of it, certainly from their side. And this last point is huge. They're being able to understand the enforcement on government policy, and where things are going is going to be very large as time goes on. So our expectations, we are going to draw our conclusions at the final survey, so stay tuned. But the decisive factors will be the price, competitive pricing. Initially, the only other fortified oil on the market was palm, as Professor mentioned. Palm now faces an import duty. So in the span of this project, when this project was first designed, there was no palm on the market, then there was fortified palm on the market. Now palm is very expensive. So you can see that the market conditions change immensely over time. The price difference, as I mentioned, the price difference with other edible oils, the consumer, their willingness to pay. Some people, especially in Manyara region, say, that's fortified, I want it. And Shinyanga will say, I just want the cheapest oil. Some people will say, sunflower oil, always. Some people will say, why are you adding something to my sunflower oil? So being able to work around and to educate and to market around these ideas is very important. And I think I've touched on most of it. I'm going to hand it back to Professor to talk about the household survey.
All right. Thank you, Nadira. Sokoto University of Agriculture is a public partner in this project. Public partner. So what are we doing? So in this project, what we're actually doing in our side is to help, first of all, the SMEs to come up with a product that is acceptable. So we have run training programs for these SMEs on GMP, good manufacturing practice, and GHP, good health practices. And for that, they have been able to produce oil that meets the criteria for fortification, because you have to check the levels of free fatty acid, hydroperoxides, and acid in value, a couple of quality parameters, so that you can fortify. And all these SMEs we are working with qualified for that, and they got permission from Tanzania Food and Drug Administration to be able to fortify the oil. So that's the first step. But the other step is that we are actually working with all these partners to be able to evaluate effectiveness. Is this project effective in addressing the stated objectives? For instance, improving the retinal status or vitamin A status of the children and lactating mothers. So to do this, we did the baseline survey at the household level, where we collected oil samples from about 4,500 households. And all these oil samples we analyzed for the content of retinol to ensure that, okay, are they at the baseline receiving oil that is fortified? And then we also collected blood samples from children at the age of 5, because eventually what he wanted to be able to show is whether there has been any improvement in the retinal status of these children. So we collected blood samples, and we analyzed it for the content retinal binding protein, which we converted into retinal levels, and therefore we're able to determine the levels of vitamin status of the children at the baseline. So what we are talking up here is the baseline issues, because end line is coming next month. So we surveyed the households, collected some very important information, and we collected oil samples, which we analyzed by using HPLC, and we also collected the oil samples, blood samples, for which we determine serum levels of retinol. So what I'm going to show you a couple of slides here are some of the status quo when we started the project. And for at the national level, you can see the level of vitamin A deficiency is 38%. But in Manyara, in the study area, based on the demographic and household survey 2010, was 47.6 in Manyara. But when we did our study, you can actually see that the prevalence is much higher of vitamin A among children under the age of 5. For Shinyanga, based on DHS 2010, the prevalence was 41%. But when we did the study, we realized also the prevalence of vitamin A deficiency was much higher among the children at the age of 5. So generally, the problem is bigger than even it is stated in the literature that is available globally. And then we noticed as well that for mothers who were breastfeeding, you can actually see that the children who were still being breastfed, the prevalence was 15.37. But those who are not breastfed, the mothers, sorry, not the children, sorry, mothers who are breastfeeding, the prevalence was 15.37. But for those who were not, then they were 14.03. So you can actually see that looks like those who are no longer breastfeeding, maybe they had older children. it means that they were far away from the birth point. So this was one of the things that we noticed. And if we look at the relationship between the mother's vitamin A status and the child's nutrition status, for mothers who do not have vitamin A deficiency, you can actually see that children whose mothers were breastfeeding had 16.3, where prevalence was 16.93. But for those who were not breastfed, you can actually see 16.55. It means that there was some advantage. There was a little advantage for the children who were actually still being breastfed. So in terms of maternal vitamin A deficient themselves, you can actually see that the mothers who were breastfeeding, the prevalence was slightly higher, vitamin A deficiency was slightly higher compared to those who were no longer breastfeeding. So we have quite some other details which for the interest of time, I think we should just leave them. So vitamin A deficiency in children by supplementation in the last 6 months. Actually, here we are talking of children who received mega doses of vitamin A. We have a national program for providing vitamin A mega dose for children twice every year. So for those who may have received a mega dose, you can actually see that those who received those were given vitamin A supplement in the past 6 months, you can actually see that the prevalence of vitamin A was almost 70%. But here, these are age. So for those who are not given vitamin A supplement, you can actually see that they increased over the age. And what we are trying to say is that mothers tend to ignore the issue of sending their children for these vitamin A mega doses. The older the child, the less they take them for this supplementation. And that's why you can actually say that as the child grows, then the number, the percent of children who are actually sent to the health centers for the supplementation usually increases. In other words, mothers of young children are more sensitive to healthy programs, especially vaccination and these kind of things. And then vitamin A deficiency of women among women by regions, you can actually see that based on DHS 2010, you can actually see that for all, these are all women around in the 2 regions, but here Manyara and Manyara had a higher prevalence of vitamin A among ladies compared to Shinyanga. Now, based on our evaluation in 2015, you can actually see that the same reflection comes here for mothers in Manyara had higher prevalence of vitamin A relative to their peers who were found in Shinyanga region. Now, here there is an issue of cutoff point because this is the standard cutoff point for determining vitamin A deficiency among mothers. So the value that is recommended by WHO was actually used by the DHS 2010. Here we are using a currently recommended WHO cutoff point. And when we use the current one, you can actually see the prevalence of vitamin A deficiency among mothers is even higher. And therefore here, when we use the current one, you can actually see that the prevalence is much higher. So here, what we are actually trying to say is that in our study, we are actually trying to use the currently recommended cutoff point, and that's why it is here. And therefore, when you use this cutoff point, which is higher than what was used in 2010, then you can actually see the situation is even worse off. So we have some other aspects which we are also doing, and one of those things is to keep to study the shelf stability of retinol in oil. The market model has come up with an event that many people buy oil in scoops, which means they needed to buy fortified oil in large containers, and for the retailers to be able to sell out the oil, they needed to open and be able to sell out in small scopes. So one of the things that we're actually doing is to study the potential loss of retinol in these containers when they are opened. And we are also doing a study showing how many days when the container, 20-liter container of fortified oil is opened and sold out maybe for 3-4 days, how much of the retinol is actually degraded based on this practice. So this is one of the things that we want to document because it is going to influence the fortification levels of retinol down the line. And then one other thing we're also trying to study sorry, is for how long. For instance, one of the retailers may decide to buy the oil and keep it for a period of up to 6 months. So how much retinol will be still left in the oil before it reaches levels that may not be beneficial for the consumer? So we are also conducting this kind of study. So these are things that are going on with the project, and eventually when we come to the end of wrap-up period, maybe if you invite me to another meeting in February, I'll be able to tell you very interesting things. Yeah, I'll talk to the organizers about it. So in conclusion, you want to conclude?
I'll conclude.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to basically, I will actually conclude with some next steps. So as Professor mentioned, we have an end line, a second phase of e-voucher discount, and looking at cheaper alternatives. So stay tuned for our project and feel free to ask us